All right, so as we are looking at the next stage of section 2.8, we're still going to graph using two variables in the inequality. So in this case, remember, any time that you see an absolute value, anytime you see an absolute value and it's a function, again, how do I know it's a function? Because it has an x, an input, and an output. So anytime you see the absolute value as a function, it will always bounce, either like a rooftop or like a valley or a V. It will always bounce like this. Absolute value means it's going to bounce. And of course, where does it bounce? It's going to bounce at the vertex. So you spent some time reviewing on how to graph, and now let's actually just refresh the process that we'll do below. Okay, so graphing an absolute value function inequality is the same as graphing a linear inequality, exactly the same. What we need to do is determine the properties of my line or my curve. We need to determine the curve style, dashed or solid, and then the shading direction. So determine the properties. Remember, we need, in this case, we need to know the vertex. That tells me where to begin. And then we need to know how to move. How to move. In other words, we need to know the direction. And we also need to know the slope. Now remember, the last two there tell me how to move. This tells me where to begin. And these two together tell me how to move. Does the V open upward or does the V open downward? Is it a steep up or down? And the vertex just tells me how much it's shifted left or right and up and down. Next, curve style. We need to know if this is, and when I say curve style, lines, the line, is it going to be dashed or solid? Dashed or solid? And lastly, do I shade above or below the line? The only time we don't shade above or below is when you have a vertical line. Vertical line means that you'll shade left or right. Okay, so let's walk through this first one right here. Let's interpret. There are 5 pieces of information I need. 5 pieces of information. Number 1, what kind of line is it? Dashed or solid? We see here, it is a dashed line. So I'm going to just write that down for my own sake. It's a dashed line. Which way am I going to shade when I shade? Below or above? Well, because y is by itself, I'm going to shade down. Shade down. Or shade under the curve. Or under the V. Next, I need to figure out where to begin. Well, remember I take the opposite of what I see inside. So my vertex is going to be at the 3 and the positive 1. That tells me where to begin. And let's see. Oh, right in front there is a positive. So that means it opens up. So in other words, it's a V shape, not a rooftop. And lastly, my slope is 2 over 1. In other words, I go up to right 1, but also up to left 1, because the V opens upward. So now that I've collected all that information, again, none of that actually needs to be written down unless you're asked to explain. So this is all mental. Now, I do know where I'm shifted. Remember, I'm shifted right 3 and up 1 from the from the origin. So maybe I'll make my crosshairs not exactly perfect crosshair because I'm going to spend more time in quadrant 1. So where's my vertex? 3, 1 is right here. I'm going in the upward direction because of the positive 2 in the front. And I go up to right 1 and also up to left 1, up to right 1 and up to left 1. So the V is pretty steep, or a tighter V. As we said earlier, it's a dashed situation. So I'm going to dash it. And lastly, it says I'm going to shade underneath. I'm going to shade underneath. So in this case, I'm going to shade all of this. So please tell your neighbor, what is one point that should work, and what is one point that should not work? Discuss real quick. So as we do look at part B here, they're very close, except as pointed out, we have a -6 there that needs to be moved over. So that's true that this is not slope-intercept form, but you can think of it as slope-intercept form in some fashion. So here we can go ahead and add the 6 to both sides, and when I do that, I get y is greater than or equal to negative absolute value of x plus 2, and now I add my 6. Now we're at a point where we can look at the 5 pieces of data. In other words, what kind of line am I going to have? What kind of shading am I going to do? What kind of vertex am I going to have? Which direction do I open? And what's my slope? Please have a quick conversation with your neighbor about those. Go. Good, so the first thing is solid line. Now tell me something else, please. Now we are going to also shade up because of the greater than symbol at this stage, not necessarily at that stage before. All right, so our vertex is -2, 6. We know where to begin, -2, 6. Notice if I were to sketch that real quick and just use crosshairs, -2, 6 is way down here. So I'm not going to spend my time necessarily in those quadrants. So I'm going to focus in quadrant number 3. Good, and the slope is -1, or we can think of it as going in the downward direction. So the direction is down, and we're going to go down 1, right 1, and then down 1, left 1 as well. So let's just put it all together now and graph it. Again, I did a quick sketch here, a quick sketch right there, so that I know I'm spending most of my time in quadrant 3. So here are my axes. Throw a few numbers down for scale purposes. Now I begin at -2. Oops, what was my mistake? Yeah, there we go. Hashtag epic fail. All right, so I've got to go through and clean that up. Good, so I accidentally plotted to -6, -2, -6, so it's actually up here, right? So I'm staying away from those ones. All right, so let me fix that. I have really good erasing ability, and you probably don't. Sorry about that. All right, so -2, +6 is up here, 4, 6, right there. And notice that we're shading above that. So watch this, don't write this yet because I'm going to have to undo things. Notice I'm going to shade and it's going to look something like, well, not necessarily, it's going to look something like this, and then I have to shade above it. So again, notice that most of my graph that I wrote is dedicated to not my answers. So because of that, I'm going to want to clean that up a little bit. And so I will shift again down, like so. And then place some scale, 2, 4, 6, -2 over here. -2, 6 is here. Now we open downward, so I go down 1, right 1, and then down 1, left 1. So notice it's all the corners. And solid line because of the greater than and equal to. And now I'm going to actually shade above. So shading above should look like this. While I'm shading this, please tell your neighbor what is one answer, one solution, and one not solution. All right, so as we check here, 0, 7 should actually work. So if I were just to plot that real quick, 0, 7 is right here. Good, so we expect it to work. So let me plug in 0 right here and 7 right there. Oh, excuse me, not in the 6, 7 here. So when I subtract, I get 1 on the right side, and then over here gives me a -2. So 1 is greater than -2, and the answer is yes, that should work. All right, now please tell me one false. All right, and let's look at 1, 1 to see if that is. 1, 1 is right there, and we expect it to not work. So again, let's just check up here. 1, 1. If I were to put 1 right here and 1 right there, this gives me a -5, greater than or equal to, and over here gives me a -3. And that is a false statement. Owing $5 is better than owing $3? Not true. So the last thing we do want to look at is, can we convert and go backwards? Excuse me. So what we want to do is attack this one, and instead of extracting the 5 pieces of data from the equation, we want to put the 5 pieces of data into the inequality. I misspoken, inequality. So now we know which way it shades. So clearly we see that it shades down. So how do I help use that? Well, shading down means less than, right? So next to the y, let me put a less than. Like that. So the shading helps me with the less than symbol. Now dashed or solid. Dashed or solid. This one over here is a solid. Therefore, I put the equal to sign there. So far, I know what symbol to use. It's less than or equal to. Y is less than or equal to. Next, I think about which direction the graph is headed. Notice that it is opening upward, which now gives me, because it opens upward, I know that this here is positive. You don't have to actually write the positive. I'm just showing you that it's positive there. So that's positive, and that's my graph direction, positive there, in the upward direction. What's my vertex? So my vertex is going to be what? Well, let's look at the graph here, and I see that my vertex here is at -4 and -3. Remember, I have to take the opposite of what I see with the x, exactly what I see with the y. So the -4, +3 is going to be placed into the function. The -4 goes here as the opposite, and the -3 is outside here. Now the only thing I'm missing is how steep things are. How steep things are, that's my slope. So all I have to do is graph my slope by counting. From one nice point to another nice point, I just go up 1, right 1, and that is it. So my slope is just 1.
What if you put 2 over 2?
So if I put 2 over 2,
It's still right.
yep, so 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. Yep, so it doesn't matter how you count, the ratio will still be the same. All right, so now let me finish it up and then simplify where need be. So I put the positive and the 1 there. I don't need those. So let me actually write the final answer. Y is less than or equal to the absolute value of x plus 4, subtract 3. And that is what I commit to. Yes, I did put the +1 in there, but that was just a placeholder so that I can tell which direction things go and how steep things are.